Welcome to Not Just Ads, the show where B2B brands discover how creator-led content drives pipeline, builds trust, and grows long-term brand equity. Each episode, we speak with business leaders, founders, and creators who are defining their categories. I'm your host, Marcus Sherwin, and this is the creator economy for B2B. Hello and welcome today to Not Just Ads, the creator economy for B2B. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Nia Henry. Nia has a very wide background in marketing and demand generation, working in a number of scale-ups and startups. And I'm really looking forward to talking to her today. She has a wide range of experience and we're really looking forward to getting deeper into the conversation around B2B and demand generation. Nia, thanks very much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for inviting me. Super excited to be here today, Marcus.
How did the journey come about, and was it something that you decided that you wanted to study early on or work in early on, or was it something that you just kind of happened throughout your career?
Yeah, I think I was lucky to have a specialty or a niche super early because I started at an agency. And the agency I was at really only took on B2B SaaS clients. And so I spent a year at that agency. It was lots of kind of trial by fire, everything from email to paid ads to we kind of like really fully supported those companies. And after a year, I was brought on to a Series C startup. They were in a little bit of a pinch because they had just laid off their entire marketing team. They had no marketing. The board didn't believe in anything that the marketing team was doing previously. They really needed to get someone in to revamp their demand gen engine. And so they took a risk on me. They were the client of the agency. And so everything was kind of like hush hush on an NDA. They brought me in, but they brought me in as fractional. I was high risk. Their board was not on board with me necessarily, but they needed someone. And so it was just the fastest, easiest. I was familiar with the account. I had worked on the account for quite a while. And so I was kind of brought on like as a director because that's the role that they wanted to hire for. And so from there, it kind of just snowballed, Marcus. I think it started with kind of helping them to we greatly increase their pipeline. We were able to establish a great relationship with sales. We were able to really get a demand gen engine running that brought inbound leads, which they hadn't gotten before. They had relied mostly on outbound because marketing wasn't really working. It was like MQLs and leads, and they weren't getting any opportunities from their efforts. And so with that, I just got lots of referrals. Like I suddenly, because their VCs were super impressed with the turnaround and how much they were able to increase revenue and cash flow, I just got lots of referrals. And for the last 10 years, I've been going from startup to startup and just kind of doing it in 4 parts, going in and establishing what their demand gen foundation should be, creating a relationship with sales that's fruitful and productive. A lot of times that's one of the biggest barriers. Then bringing in a team to manage kind of what I started, and then training that team and meeting their pipeline goals. And then I would just go to the next company. So I've been doing that for the majority of my career. And now I'm in-house at Kant and loving, my current role because it allows me to draw from all those experiences across like different industries, lots of regulated industries. So you have to be tricky with how creative you can get, especially with like cybersecurity and whatnot. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
Great. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. How do you find then, because when you made that move initially from agency into one of your clients, and I guess there's a lot of pressure there because of lots of things to fix and everything like that. What do you find then when you go into a role like that, in order to get hit the ground running, but also that it's something kind of like that you're building momentum, and you've been, as you mentioned, in a number of different startups and stuff. So what do you find in terms of like, what are the best learnings if somebody is going to a new role, in your opinion, and like, what are the things that you found most useful to kind of hit the ground running and make impact in a short space of time?
I think my perspective on that might be a little different just because of the many, many startups that I've been at. One thing that I will say is customer insights are probably more important than product insights. A lot of times marketers feel overwhelmed because they are trying to learn the product. They're trying to understand like, how does this product work? They're trying to figure out what's the best way to market this product? What are competitors? How are they marketing their product? And initially I did that at that first company, but I didn't understand anything. I mean, I kind of, they were launching something new. They didn't have a marketing team to launch it. And they had been working on the product for a while, but hadn't shared it with the agency while I was there. So everything they were describing didn't make sense. And so I just relied on what I knew, which was their customers. While I was there, I understood who their customers were and kind of just focused on that. I think anytime you're going into a new role, you just have to focus on the customer and the problem that they have and less on the product. A lot of times going into these new companies, it takes a long time for me. I make mistakes when talking about the product. And sometimes they think they're making a mistake with me because they're like, that's not how we do it. But I tell them, yeah, it's fine. I'll learn the product. Right now, I'm more focused on the customer than the product. I really want to know what's the problem? How are they facing that problem today? What are they doing now? How are they currently maneuvering that? And you can get insights from a lot of different ways. It's not just speaking to the customer. I know that that's like kind of the go-to. And of course, that's a crucial step, talking to a customer too, and really walking through like what made them decide to purchase the product. But there's so many other ways. You can speak with other leaders in that industry. You can join a lot of those communities that they're in, whether it's on Reddit or Slack or LinkedIn or wherever they are, and just kind of see what they're talking about. You can do social listening, like looking at those keywords to see what people are saying. There's a lot of ways to kind of get to know the customer, but I'd say that's the first thing, get to know the customer. And the second thing is really focus on your relationship with sales. A lot of marketers complain about a lot of things, and it usually ties back to the fact that there's no relationship, there's not a productive and relationship and effective relationship with sales. So those are the first two things that I would recommend anytime you go into a role. Just understand the customer and work with sales. And those things go hand in hand as well. You can learn a lot about the customer from talking to sales, joining some of those demos, see what questions they're asking, and ask questions of sales too. They want to be pressure tested. You know, a lot of times marketers are afraid to dig too deep with sales because they get offended or whatever. But just ask those questions. Why are we not asking this? What do we know about this? Can we ask this question in the demo? And you'll get a lot of insights that way. And your marketing will be so much stronger and scale so much faster as well.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think the challenge that some people have, the bigger the organization, the bigger the silo, the further you are away. Whereas a scale up, I suppose it's you're more agile to be able to make those movements and kind of keep your finger on the pulse, whether it's on the customer side or also via sales to the customer as well. So it makes total sense. What do you think in terms of actual like tactics, and without getting too much into the weeds of things, but like tactics with sales of what you see that's worked well on like kind of a weekly basis? Would you join demos? But even in terms of like how your activities that you're doing that's helping them, what have you found that's worked well in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, joining demos, I actually don't do it too often. It's like periodically I'll say like for the next week I want to join a few demos, and it's really just to test how your marketing is doing. Are you still current on what's happening? Are you still current on challenges? Are you still current on, do you have any gaps in your content that you're distributing? Are there places that you should be distributing? So don't join demos as often. I think in terms of tactics, it really depends on what that relationship looks like initially. Is sales open to marketing at all? Because sometimes there's no openness to it. It's kind of like, you guys do your thing, we're doing our thing. Like, you guys are bringing leads, we don't care about that. So it really depends on how well sales is receiving marketing. But some of the tactics that I have done in the past that have worked are, especially if you have a very averse sales team, is just redefining everything. What is a lead? What is an MQL? What is an SQL? What is an opportunity? Sometimes it means rebuilding that workflow, that maybe this shouldn't be considered an opportunity because for us it's an opportunity, but for you guys, you know, it's not necessarily shown enough for it to be considered an opportunity. So redefining kind of what those different life cycle stages mean. Some other things that work are building in, and you'll have to work with operations to do this, but building in a feedback loop in the CRM. So how can sales say whether it's bad timing or whether this is a valid opportunity, or even is this considered spam, bad contact info, they're no longer there? Because as a marketer, you can go and look at that regularly and come to meetings with sales prepared with some data on that. So
Yeah.
we're seeing that X percentage of qualified leads are coming from this channel. And so as the marketing team, we're going to invest X percent more in that channel to get you guys more of those leads. That's kind of how you build the trust with sales, is taking any information they're giving you and figuring out how to build that into what you're actually doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting as well. I guess it's because even the smallest changes can make a big difference in terms of if the communication is flowing, it's much easier because you're aligned. But if you have a big silo and you're working on guesswork, it's very difficult because you're trying to communicate what you're doing, but also then making assumptions as well. So it's
Yeah.
how do you find then in terms of channels and things like that, especially in B2B? What have we found is like in the most effective in the different startups that you've worked in as like kind of an awareness versus demand gen channels? What have we found is being most effective as I'd say certain platforms mature over the years?
Oh, that's a great question, but it changes depending on the industry. I think that one of the channels that a lot of companies shirk at or sometimes flat out don't want to do is paid search. And I think that you should always have a layer of paid search because
Yeah,
really the only channel where you can find someone actively searching for what it is that you offer. The only time paid search doesn't work is when it's just too niche, it's just a little bit too narrow of an industry. But more recently, I think that what's working and what we're seeing working a lot is influencer marketing. I was completely against influencer marketing about 2 years ago. I was like, it doesn't work. I had tried it with a couple of companies. We spent lots of money and we got a lot of impressions. We got a lot of recognition, we got an increase in engagement, but it literally turned to nothing. It just wasn't. And I think that because it was so new, so creators also didn't know how to do it naturally. They didn't quite know how to clearly state that it's a partnership, but also weave it into their story. And influencer marketing was very new. So they were, of course, excited about sponsorships and kind of went all in with I'm partnering with so and so. They didn't really create stories around it. So I think creators are doing a lot better job of telling the story and weaving it in and making it sound a little bit more natural while also being transparent that this is a partnership, but here's why I'm partnering with them, as opposed to like I'm partnering with them and here's what they do and here's what they have. So I think influencer marketing is something that B2B companies should be paying attention to because it's gotten a lot better, especially if you tried it in the past. It's much different now. It's a lot better now.
yeah, yeah. We're seeing that a lot as well. There's a lot of platforms. There's Limelight. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're basically a platform connecting brands to creators specifically focused on B2B. And some of the stats they share is really interesting around how it's evolving and how companies, especially now, we spoke a couple of weeks ago to the global head of social influencers at Salesforce, and she was kind of explaining how they ran an influencer campaign, and they got a phone call from somebody that they would have never matched following this influencer asking if one of the products has a certain type of service, even though it was in market for months. So this was like a real aha moment for them. But that may not show up in an attribution model. So I think that's probably from what I see is like the initial pushback is that it doesn't slot in on the paid social / paid search attribution kind of touch points. I think that'll improve over time though as it evolves and as it matures more. But it's definitely something that's really effective. How do you see it at the moment in terms of the play? Is it more like an awareness that you use it for, or does it also serve as like a demand channel of driving inbounds and stuff like that?
I actually think that it has transformed into more of a demand channel. I think it has
Really?
transformed to building inbound. I mean, you're huge on LinkedIn. I see your posts all the time. What do you think about influencer marketing?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of trails of thought on it. So the one thing is that there I think if you just go and you spread yourself really broad and you go okay, like all these different influencers and they have reach and I can just get my message out through those, and you try it as a once off, I think it's not really going to be effective. I think it's more of a long term play of what I've seen, but there needs to be an alignment between the creator and then also the brand as well. and it needs to work both ways. Like whatever the kind of messaging that the creator is doing, that they see that there's a link, because you can see it with some creators. They're posting about something that's not, that they maybe just used it once, and their audience can see that as well. And that I don't think is really effective in the long term, because it doesn't really build any additional credibility for a user base on the brand, but also for the creator as well. It kind of maybe might not damage, but like it might cause a trust issue maybe with their audience. So that's one thing. I think the alignment thing is one thing. And then the other thing as well is that as channels are maturing now to kind of more pay to play, I
Mhm.
think there probably needs to be an element of pay to amplify it more, because every platform goes through that stage. Yeah, Facebook, Instagram only through it probably 5, 6 years ago. It kind of evolved into this more pay to play. LinkedIn, we're seeing that now in the last, say, 6, 7 months as they're more integrated with Microsoft. So it's really good, the creative part, because you can really get to certain audiences that have trust there, but
Mhm.
you need to amplify it further in order to reach a larger base of their existing audience. I think that's kind of where I see it. But I think as engagement in terms of getting to an audience, I think it can be super effective.
And what metrics do you think a brand should look at when determining an influencer? Because I think that I've spoken with a few brands, and that's where I feel like they struggle the most is, yeah, it's kind of our audience, but we don't really know what metrics to ask for. So you being an influencer.
Yeah, I think the one thing probably what people are looking at is reach. But I think that's really, it's probably a bit of a vanity metric in a way, because you need to kind of look at other things that are impacted. For instance, on LinkedIn, you'll see if you're running paid campaigns, you can see dwell time. So what dwell time means is, you've probably seen this before, but you can see how much they've actually dwelled as opposed to scroll on to something else.
Mhm.
So if you can see that that's increasing, you know that it's having an impact. And then you have the thing on the platform, they're like lurkers, you know what I mean? That they're consuming your content, but they're not liking, they're not engaging, they're not commenting. But it is having an impact, because, and it can show up on dwell time, but it's something that you won't, again, see it on an attribution report. So I would say probably the entry point maybe is maybe reach, who you're reaching exactly, but then it needs to be timed with what impact you're getting from sales. So let's say you actually run every recorded call or every sales call when you're running a creator campaign, and you're listening to see, is there anything in terms of category entry points or anything in terms of the messaging that's fed back from the
Yeah.
prospect, from demos or the clients, and then it kind of gives you a picture. So yeah, that's what I see. I think you can't kind of go like, oh, focus on reach, and then you try and get them into the funnel and all that. I think you need to be a little bit more dynamic of how you approach it like that. So it's really a match of reach is one thing, dwell time, but also then looking at the data from what are the customers saying that are coming into the funnel. Maybe they haven't even engaged at all, but they've consumed it in some way.
Yeah, yeah. I think also kind of tying it back into the brand story is really
Yeah.
important as well. I know that back when we were running creative campaigns and they failed massively a few years ago, some of the numbers looked good. Like we vetted audience and it made sense. Like there was a lot of cross audience, et cetera. But I think that the story portion of it and the offer portion of it wasn't as strong. So a lot of those posts did well in terms of like impressions, right? And did well in terms of engagement and lots of comments because we would create content specifically for those partnerships. So videos, or we'll do free giveaways and content giveaways. So those really work, but they just never turned into opportunities. And what I'm seeing now, and especially speaking with a lot of brands, is that the creator campaigns are not doing well numbers wise, especially because they're being a little bit more transparent about being a partner. But those opportunities are coming in. You said the lurkers. I think that's important is to account for the lurkers. And yeah, it doesn't fit into a perfect attribution model. You can't track that back to say you saw this, but they will mention it, right? And they'll say that, oh, I saw so and so mention you. And so that's really important too, is to just remember that the numbers don't always tell the full story, because a lot of times the ones who are really serious about buying will just skip liking the post and engaging with the post and just go straight to researching the company and saying, oh, maybe I need to know a little bit more about this company. Like they'll get off of the platform and go look at the company and research it if they are motivated from that campaign.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I guess the key thing is like what you mentioned. Look, initially, if the numbers are really good and there's like there's a huge amount of impressions and you're reaching loads of people, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't create any opportunities, it's just vanity metrics. Really, it's much better to have a much smaller reach, but if a few opportunities come off that, and some of those close to one, at least you have something tangible then.
Yeah, one more thing I would add is that if you are running a creator campaign or an influencer campaign, outside of the numbers associated with the posts and campaign itself, some other metrics to track that would be helpful are company page visits and branded search. So if you're at the same time that we ran this campaign, we saw an increase in branded search or even direct. A lot of times you can kind of correlate that because when the campaign stops, you see it drop a little bit, right? And so those are some metrics just to be creative in how you're reporting on it and other factors to look at as well.
Yeah. When you run the creator campaigns, then what way do you normally do it? Do you do it through an agency, or do you go directly with the creators and just have a creative partnership that way, or what have you found is the most effective?
I mean, I've always done it directly, so I've never used an agency, but we may attempt that in the future. Yeah. And now that agencies are getting a little bit more common, like you mentioned, Limelight, and I've seen a few others as well, where they're connecting brands and influencers. I think that's something that's worth testing for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. How about then, now that we mentioned about creators and stuff, the new format on LinkedIn, have you tested this with the thought leader ads? Have you having like some of the employee advocacy and leadership companies being the face of the brand and stuff, like building in public? How do you see that in terms of as a marketing strategy? And you seen that in some of the companies that you've worked in before working well?
That's actually currently our biggest play at Compt. Most of our ads are thought leader ads. We have someone dedicated to what the story is, what are we saying. We have a couple of employees who are advocating for the brand as well. And so I go in every week and we actually have a channel where we show the different posts that we're promoting. I have campaigns in LinkedIn that are associated with different facets of our brand. So we offer at Compt, we offer stipends for HR leaders to be able to provide benefits to their employees. And so we have different categories of benefits. We have like health and wellness benefits, we have professional development. And so each of those have their own campaign group in LinkedIn. And then we will promote employee advocacy posts within those different campaigns. And in the past couple of months, we've seen SQL come from them. We've seen them come up in conversations with sales. We've seen tons of engagement from the CEO's posts. We did a huge push for the last couple of years on promoting the founder of the company and having her build in public and kind of sharing her perspective and her view on things. It's less on the product and again, more on the story. So we don't
Yeah.
do a product post. It's just more so our perspective that if you care about employees, then this is the way to show them that you care. We just kind of hone that message a million different ways. Even myself, I was recently sick. I don't know if you saw that post. I was recently sick and I kind of posted about that and got transparent and shared how having those stipends can really help in those times. So we try to use as many personal stories as possible and real experiences as possible as well. And we have a very dedicated flow to that, a system for that.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's true. I'm sorry to hear about your illness. I didn't see that post actually, so I'm sorry to hear about that. I hope you're better, you're feeling better. Um, the other thing that's interesting, what you mentioned at the start of that as well, is around the stories. Like B2B, everybody talks about B2C, B2B, and B2B needs to be more stories. And I think what some people do is they lean to the default of like B2B is boring, so we need to be funny. And
Yeah.
there's a lot more
Yes.
emotions that you can go in different directions. From what you mentioned of, it's definitely much more relatable when you can actually tell a story or tell something that's relatable rather than just always going to this humor default. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that now in B2B of how companies that have maybe software products, not a lot of people really care about the features until you actually come down to the very, very last thing of like what it can do, unless you're really in market. But at least from what I see, the relatable story is much more digestible than something that like, this is how we compare against our competitors with these kind of features. Are you seeing the same in terms of when you see that from a marketing play? Do you get more engagement when it's something more relatable rather than features based?
Definitely, but I think that you're 100% correct that brands tend to go funny. I think it's because we see huge companies like Gong play into the whole meme thing. And so we see that it works for them, and a lot of companies kind of want to go there. Definitely. Buyers don't care about your features. They don't care what your product can do differently with this one little feature here and that one feature there. The features that we work really hard on to differentiate ourselves and that we work really hard on to bring to the market because we think that it solves this problem. Buyers really don't care, and they'll go with the company who doesn't have those features simply because they understood the problem better. I think buyers care more about, do you know what I'm dealing with? And if you can convince me that you know exactly what I'm dealing with, then I'm only going to want you. Even if you don't have the features that the other company has, I want you because you're going to help me solve this problem because you really understand this problem. I think that helps a lot. So, at Compt, our storytelling revolves around people because we found that, we target HR leaders. And so they're all about people, and they are diehards for their employees and their people and their stories. And they hear these stories all the time, but they feel like they don't have a way to help their people. So we lean into that, right? It all depends on your industry. For some industries, funny works. And actually, I think it works the stiffer the industry is. So
Yeah.
go as stiff as I worked once, like I mentioned, cybersecurity a lot, or a lot of these more rigid companies. Humor actually does work because it's so rare.
Yeah,
Get them to laugh, that's a huge win.
definitely. Like what you said, I think it's relatable to the specificities of the category or of the segment as well. If no one else is doing it, if you're doing something different, it's definitely going to stand out. That's for sure. With the category that you're in then around HR and HR benefits for comp, would you be similar to WorkHuman then, or is it kind of different in terms of what you offer?
WorkHuman is not a direct competitor, but it's the same space. I think we
Yeah.
offer more stipends and reimbursements and something called a lifestyle spending account. So instead of it being actual hard coded benefit, you can create categories based on your company values and culture.
Okay.
So you could do fertility, you can even do like pet stipends, like whatever you kind of value as a company, you can put that in, and it works a little bit different. But they're in a similar space.
Yeah. 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 One of the interesting things I saw as well, I spoke with ex-CMO of WeWork a couple of weeks ago, Robin Daniels, but chief business officer now at a company called Sensei. And what they do is it's in the HR space. But what they looked at was what he talked around was like kind of category leadership. And what they looked at was like, okay, rather than competing in an existing category, what we're looking at is kind of creating their own category. So what they created was around human success. And he was kind of talking about how, it's not an overnight thing it's more of a long-term play. But that when you kind of create your own category, you dictate the terms then, rather than when you're competing in an existing category. But I just wondered, in your experience of the different startups that you've worked in, if you've seen that played out successfully in some of the companies that you've worked with over the years.
Yes, but it's so hard. It's so difficult. And I think that if there's a category with few enough competitors, and then you should just enter the category that already exists because it's confusing, creating
Yeah.
a category. Before I was at Comp sort of created lifestyle spending accounts. I think there was one other company that was doing it at the time, and now there's lots of competitors that are doing it. So it's a long road. It's a long road to create a new category. And as the CMO that you spoke with said, it's a long game, and it's a long game that you don't know whether or not it will play off. And it's a hard, long game to test. Like you can't
Yeah.
necessarily get the upfront details to know, are people going to get this? Are they going to understand it? And I have seen it work, but I've never seen it work on the first attempt.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, what companies that I've worked with, a lot of times you end up changing what that category is because you see that it doesn't resonate. And so it's just not something that if you really want to scale quickly, it's not the best way to do that for sure. One thing that I wanted to mention also, you had talked about like B2B and kind of being stuffy. I'm noticing a new trend. I don't know if you've seen it, and it's not gotten to the point where it's annoying yet, but it probably will get there. A lot of B2B companies now are creating mascots, like cartoon animals for their brand. And what are your thoughts on that? I have some thoughts, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I think this kind of stems from Salesforce, that everybody looks at Salesforce, that they're like kind of the best in class and they did the best marketing. And then, of course, you have Ehrenberg Bass. I'm sure you're probably familiar with them. They're like the research unit and B2B in LinkedIn, which they kind of do some collaborations on research and stuff. And one of the pieces of research that Ehrenberg Bass did was around what's they call it, mental availability and distinctive acids. I can't remember the second name, Jennifer or somebody, but she wrote a book on it, distinctive acids, and distinctive acids being a jingle or a type of logo, and one of those is a mascot. And as a result of that, every kind of software company now has to have a mascot. And for me, I think it's something that I think personally, yes, it can work, but if we're looking at the same playbook as the Salesforce, you're playing in a different category completely because you just don't have the pockets that they have at the moment. When 20 years ago, if Salesforce was the same size, like, okay, and actually Robin Daniels that I mentioned earlier, he was talking about how back in the mid-noughties that they would travel to different towns and kind of have these evangelists, and it was very much grassroots based, talking about people like CRM and so on. So I don't see how it's something that is like a necessity, like it's a must have. I can see how there's an association mentally and that makes sense and it kind of stands out. But I don't always see what the connection is. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you think about Salesforce and the what do Salesforce have? I can't remember what the logo is, but it's a kind of a sheep or something. But like when you think is it the llama? No, no. LinkedIn have a llama, but nobody used to see it at events when I was there. But
There's a few more links popping up, by the way.
yeah. But this is the thing. It's kind of like what's the association with that animal and the brand? What where is the association? Is it just doing something for the sake of doing it? And if you're just doing it because of that, because it's the best practice and it's some research piece that's based on a big company that has very, very deep pockets to invest in these kind of things, I personally don't really see what the effectiveness part in it is. But maybe there's data to back it up that it actually I'm wrong. But personally speaking, I don't see I think it's just a copy play to stand out, but I don't see how it's effective. What do you think?
Well, that's actually my take. I think that I hardly ever see the connection between what the actual mascot is and what they actually do. But I will say it probably does increase brand recall. I can imagine that it does do that up quite a bit. My follow-up question to that is kind of, we talked about having personal stories. We talked about that versus product features or, promoting differentiators or us versus them type of content in lieu of storytelling. One thing that I've noticed with these mascots is that most recently they're cute, right? And there's so many things you can do with them as you're announcing something. You can have them crying, you can have them doing things that they're kind of cute, right? You can create actual real items that you can send to people and they'll remember you or whatever. Do you think that's a replacement though for human storytelling? I think that's kind of my concern with where this is going. It's like, are we relying too much on the mascot when you have actual people at the company who can show themselves in the company a little bit more and create brand affinity and brand recall that way, as opposed to like seeing this animal all over the place and everyone's talking about the animal and the focus is on the animal, but not necessarily the company and the values and like what they're trying to do and how they're trying to solve problems. Because I do think that message gets lost with these mascots.
Yeah, it's an interesting point of what you make about the brand recall because that makes sense in a way when you think who you associate it with, but you don't know why you associate it with it. I would say that it's cheaper having a mascot than having like a paid collaboration. That's maybe one. I think it's something that you just get the sense that it's like one company copying the other to have a mascot, and
Yeah.
it's like something that you should do. And it's not even just in B2B. You see it with sports clubs; they have mascots. So I guess it's taken from there to some extent. But if there's probably more value in terms of actually having a human and somebody telling a story about what they do rather than just the mascot. Because if you think about it from a team perspective, the mascot is there, but it's not really that it's not it's not the focus point on the team. It's more the team and what they win and so on, or if they don't and what the story of the learning is and so on. So yeah, I'm really tied between the mascot of actually one interesting thing, and I haven't done it, but we met about maybe a year and a half ago. I was managing the HP account in LinkedIn, and I don't know if you know the company System One. They basically they do testing of ads, and they look at like how effective they are, and they run it through a number of different they run it through a number of different surveys, and they test it based on emotions and so on. And some ads like rank really high, others don't. But if they're in market for quite a long time, they rank better because as people have that association. But from
Yeah.
what they've done with a mascot, I actually haven't seen, and I'd like to see the data on that. So yeah, I'm a bit hesitant, but I guess if you can see that there's kind of data to back it up that it's effective, well then I think we've proven wrong. But personally, at the moment, I think it's just we're looking at big, massive companies that have huge investment to be able to create that memorabilia. Whereas like a smaller SMB company, I think, can probably maybe focus efforts that can be more impactful in other places. What do you think?
Well, you make a really good but scary point, that it's cheaper to invest in a mascot than it is to invest in humans, because that's kind of the fear with AI right now. It's like,
Yeah,
how many corners are we cutting because it's cheaper to invest in a digital creation than it is to invest in actual people. So that's worrying, and I hadn't thought about that, but that's probably a really good point that I wanted to highlight, because that could be a reason that a lot of these companies are going in instead of investing in people, spreading the message like, let's create this mascot that in 2 seconds we have the mascot do literally anything. We
yeah,
don't need to have video production. We don't need to do anything more than have someone create this mascot in a million different ways. And that's scary. And I think that if that's the case, that companies should really think hard about the direction that they're going in, because that's a concern as well with AI. It's like AI is great and it's useful to us humans, not replacing us humans.
yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Before we finish up, Nia, some predictions for the future. What do you think in the next, say, 24 months? Where do you see B2B heading? Any things that you're excited about, not so excited about, hopeful about, scared about?
I know it's the name of the game. I'm not a fan of the this is dead and that is dead rhetoric
Yeah.
on LinkedIn. Everything is dead on LinkedIn. But I think SEO might actually be dead if we're talking 24 months. I think realistically that anything that you want to know, you can go to ChatGPT or Perplex or any of these different generative LLMs and get the answers that you need. And we're even seeing at Compt that it's making a huge impact. Our traffic decreased quite a bit with AI and has kind of leveled out since then. But we're seeing so much traffic coming from these different generative models, and the visitors that are coming, they're staying longer, they're
Yeah.
converting faster,
That's
they're
what like
yeah, we're seeing like so much more direct coming through as well. I mean, we're investing a lot in AEO, so that's probably a big part of it, but definitely a huge shift. And I don't think that's a hot take. I think everyone kind of realizes that SEO is dead. What else I think I'll see in the next 24 months, other predictions are more mascots. I think we're going to see a lot more animals. And I get it. Like I said, brand recall, it's a quick, easy way to be memorable and to, recall the name of the company. Even if you don't recall what they do, you kind of just know the name and you know the animal. And then when that problem does surface for you and that company comes across again, you might feel a little bit more like that's a bigger brand than they actually are, right? Because you've seen their mascot so many times. So I think that's kind of an upside to that. Some other things that I think we're going to see, especially from marketers, is for a long time we had to niche down and be very specific in what it is that we do. My role at Compt is head of demand generation and marketing operations. And I think that we're going to see more combining of titles in that way. We're going to see a lot more of marketers having to step outside of their comfort zone. For a long time, because I was focused on pipeline and revenue and demand gen and paid channels and events, et cetera, I didn't have to focus on social. I think that was always kind of left to the brand manager or kind of the social team. And now that's a part of it. If you want to build pipeline, you have to figure out social. And so learn it as quickly as you can, because that's just a natural part. That's where people are connecting with each other. That's where people are grieving, airing out their grievances with each other. That's where you're going to get, as I mentioned earlier, customer insights. So I think that's probably going to be the hugest play, is that marketers have to now take into account social, and not just paid social, but organic social, brand building social, amplifying the brand through different people in the company. Employees are probably going to be asked to participate a little bit more. Well, and I'm in startup world, right? So for larger companies, maybe not so much, but I think those are probably my top predictions.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think even for larger organizations, they're getting companies now, the people within the company, to try and share more on social, even for about what they're doing in their day-to-day job, but then on the company content as well. So it's definitely a space, I think, across verticals that people are leaning into more, and it makes sense as well. People are tapping into your own employee audience. You want to get more reach and hopefully create more opportunity that way as well.
Yeah, and probably also a different approach to events. We were locked in the house with the pandemic for a couple of weeks, and everybody was back outside. And the thing is that we're there for the swag, we're there for the free items, but I'm seeing less deals being closed at events. And I think that companies have to get a little bit more creative with how they show up at events, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
But I've seen.
Say again, sorry.
I've seen you talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really looking at who you want to meet at those events, rather than just having a stand and feeling quite, for want of a better word, strategic, but like really focusing on, okay, who are in our ICPs, who are there that we know that we want to meet, and then who that we haven't met yet, how can we make sure that we get some face time with them and creating content around that as well. I think that's something. I was at an event today, and I saw it before at events where they kind of created this interview kind of thing, and they were interviewing their customers and then they were sharing that content. I didn't see it at the event today, and I was quite surprised because most of the big tech companies were there, but I think it's an opportunity that people can really get the benefit out of their attendance at those events to kind of create that hybrid situation.
Yeah, I think that one thing that companies don't do as well at events is their booths really focus on their differentiator and not necessarily the problem they're solving. And I think that that's kind of why you see a lot of people coming who are irrelevant to the ICP. It's kind of like, oh, I'm here to see what you do. Oh, I don't really need that.
Yeah.
Highlight the problem a little bit more and make it somewhere that your ICP would want to be, have something super valuable, or have it be a little bit more high profile, like you said, interviewing customers, and it's kind of, oh, what's going on over there? So there's a lot of ways, but I think that we're going to have to change the way we do events. They're getting too expensive and they don't pay off for the amount of expense that you incur going to those.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a pleasure talking with you today. If anyone wants to find you, where are you most active in terms of socials?
Definitely on LinkedIn. So I'm Nia, but you can find me on LinkedIn, Kareesha Henry, Kareesha Henry. That's probably the best place to find me, for sure. Yeah. And love to connect. So my DMs are always open.
Perfect. Great. I'll leave your details on the show notes as well. Nia, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Marcus. This was great.